What up, what's happening? My name is Charles Blades, and in this episode of The Hot Take, we're going to be talking about open world games and some of the problems they've had lately. So without further much ado, let's get to it. 2017 has been a crazy year for games, and without a doubt the year that this current generation of consoles appears to be hitting its stride. From Resident Evil 7 to Persona 5 to Zelda to Horizon, and on a smaller scale Night in the Woods and Edith Finch, it's been without a doubt the best year in recent gaming memory. With all these games to play, it's a struggle for me, someone who loves games, to even keep up. This struggle isn't aided by the fact that many of these games are giant open worlds that require me to spend a significant portion of my free time on them. While I'm not questioning that something like Breath of the Wild or Horizon deserve every second that I spend with them, I don't think the same is true of every game that has come out this year. Specifically, I don't think this is true for the Square Enix published, platinum developed, critical darling Nier Automata, which, after 4 or 5 hours this past week, I'm finally throwing in the towel. This isn't because the game's combat is frustrating, it works pretty seamlessly from what I got to try out. It isn't the narrative of the game, which I think is doing some interesting stuff in relationship to AI and what makes consciousness, but instead it's because Nier Automata takes place in a totally purposeless open world which detracts from the elements that make the game great. Nier Automata's story is, while being territory that's already been talked about a lot in other games, an interesting way to frame the subject of artificial intelligence. However, it's its desolate, empty open world that could be better realized in a tighter, more linear experience that my problem lies. I understand that the Earth is supposed to be destroyed in this game, but that doesn't make it fun to play, nor is it a very good setting. Constantly backtracking and going on meaningless side quests are the only thing the game does to encourage you to explore the world, and quite frankly, its pale bleakness left me not coming back more than I should. And it didn't have to be this way. Look at The Last of Us, Naughty Dog's opus. It is an overgrown, vacant world, but because of its linearity, it tells stories with its environment a lot better than Nier ever could. This is because the developers spent more time putting little pieces into each little nook and cranny than just worrying about its overall size. Now, I don't want to use this episode just to shit all over one game in particular. I bring this up because it's a problem generally that a lot of games have been facing the past 5 years or so. Think back to Fallout 3 and how amazing it felt to go anywhere you wanted in an open world that felt limitless. That game came out in 2008, and since, games have been trying to capture that feeling to mixed results. For every Breath of the Wild, there's an open world game that feels half-baked and seems to just check a box on a feature that a game is supposed to have. But that's the thing, not every game needs to be open world, and for the most part, when a game does an open world wrong and unnecessarily, it ruins the things that make the game great, just like Nier. The finest example of this from the current generation is 2K's Mafia 3, which was released last year to pretty reviews, to put it kindly. The biggest complaint I saw from people, our very own Trophy Pops included, was Mafia 3 was a 10-hour linear story dropped into a 40-hour open world sandbox. The narrative about Lincoln Clay and his relationship with racism in New Orleans in the civil rights era was weakened by putting it in a lifeless and empty open world with repetitive side quests and one-trick pony engagements from the inhabitants of New Bordeaux. This confluence of different game styles doesn't make Mafia 3 better. Instead, it dilutes its best elements. Think about an alternative timeline where Mafia 3 was just about engaging with its impactful story about racism in the 60s, without all the extra fluff to cloud developer Hangar 13's vision. That's something I'd be much more interested in, and on a business level it'd be much better received. So why put it in an open world? We don't need this in every single game. Another major franchise that I think has recently fallen into this trap is 2015's Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Now don't get me wrong, Metal Gear's open world does provide a few solid moments here and there, but overall, it was an additive measure that hurt it more than it helped. Stealthing in the bases, scoping out people on hillsides, and slowly and methodically taking them out was the most satisfying thing about Metal Gear Solid 5. But riding D-Horse around or jumping into a Jeep for 10 minutes to get there is what really dragged and slowed everything down to a screeching halt for me. If the missions weren't so spaced out, it'd be much better, but instead, it was put into an open world that it didn't need. Another franchise that, again, I think used this formula to mix results and took away from what earlier games did is Batman Arkham City from Rocksteady. Finally being Batman in Arkham Asylum felt fantastic, and the gradual building up of my tool set through the Metroidvania style interlocking areas was fucking awesome. Fast forward to Arkham City, and all of that interconnectivity was done. Instead, all I was left with was gliding across Snow Island for what seemed like an eternity to get to the next bat signal. That's not fun. Fighting Penguin is fun. Going from Penguin's hideout to Two-Face's hideout with a bunch of nothing in between isn't that great. These are just a few examples of how the open worldification of AAA gaming in recent years has been a bummer, especially when so many awesome experiences are coming out week after week. For every unnecessary 40-hour open world game with muddled ideas, I could play 4 10-hour linear experiences that get way more out of my time. Let's be clear, this isn't to say there should be no open worlds at all. Obviously, Red Dead Redemption 2 is something that's going to justify its size when it comes later this year. But just because one amazing game is doing something ambitious doesn't mean everybody has to do the same thing, and it gets boring after a while. There's nothing to say that you can't put an awesome experience into a linear single-player game, and developers need to stop with this notion that because something is open world it's necessarily better. It isn't, and it actively harms what makes your game great in the first place. Yeah, so that's what I thought about open world games. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share, all that YouTube stuff.